let's go ahead and take a look at how to create a decision tree in Dialogflow. Basically, if you had a bot within which you want to follow a if then else logic, how would you do that? There are two ways to do it. The first is by using follow-up intents within Dialogflow and coming up with your, or developing your bot. And the second is by using a webhook. Let's take a look at the example that we'll be using to explain this. So here's a very simple bot. Basically, if you're going on a ride in an amusement park and there's a certain criteria that you're supposed to meet to go on the ride. So you go ahead and ask the bot, can I go on the ride? It'll ask you all these follow-up questions. You give it a yes or no answer, and if you answer yes to everything, you're allowed to go on the ride. And if you say no to any one of the questions, you're told, sorry, you cannot go on the ride. So again, depending on the answer, if it's yes, you ask the next question or say that you're allowed to go on the ride, or if you say no, you see how there is an if then else logic there. The first way to do it is by what is called follow-up intents in Dialogflow. Once a conversation is going on with the bot and a user says something, what is the next follow-up intent? What is the next intent that you want to follow up with? That's what follow-up intent is. I'll show you by creating a very simple intent. Let's call this intent fly intent with a simple phrase called can I fly? The action is also fly. When you say this, the bot responds with go back here to my fly intent and let's make sure the intent is coming up or getting recognized. Can I fly? The bot comes back and says, are you sure you want to fly? So let me go back to that. Now to this fly intent, the bot is expecting you to answer yes or no. So you add a follow-up yes intent. So here is what happens. Here is how you add the follow-up intent. You just click here to and say add follow-up intent. Say yes. And when you do that, Dialogflow will create a new intent with the same name as the previous intent and append the value yes to it towards the end as far as the name goes. And if you go look inside the intent, you'll see that it has pre-populated it with a few training phrases, which could be the different ways in which a user might say yes. And for text response, I'm going to add here I'm going to add what is called a no intent also. These are the different phrases that a user might utter to say no, and what is the follow-up action or follow-up intent that you want to trigger when the user says no. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and say, so now let's try it out. So fly intent has two follow-up intents, yes and no intent, and this arrow here kind of tells you that the follow-up intents are associated to the fly intent above. And one other thing you'll also see is if you go in here, you'll see Dialogflow has created contexts. The context says fly intent follow-up for the yes, and probably for the no also it should be saying the same thing. Fly intent follow-up for the no too. So you ask the question, can I fly? It comes back and asks you, are you sure you want to fly? So basically the intent was recognized as fly intent. And when you say yes to that, it will come back and trigger the intent called fly intent yes, which is this. So you say great, go ahead and have a great flight. And now let me reset the context and ask the same question, can I fly? And to this, if you say no, then it's going to come back and it's going to trigger, or it's going to recognize and call the fly intent no intent and come back and say, okay, you don't have to fly if you don't want to. That was quickly to show you what the follow-up intent is. Now let's go back to our actual example. The first time the user comes and asks, can I go on this ride? So that's question one. When you say, can I go on the ride? The bot responds by asking you a question. Are you 8 years or older? That's this question. When you say that, or in response to that question, assuming you say yes, if you say yes, it's going to ask you your next question, which is, are you 45 inches or more in height? That is question one, yes. So it's going and asking you, are you 45 inches or more in height? Now, let's say you said yes to that question too, then you have said yes twice. So question one, yes, yes. And to that, again, it's going to come and ask you the next question, which is, do you weigh more than 45 pounds? Now, if you say yes to that, that means you have said yes 3 times, and hence you have question one, yes, yes, yes. And then comes the final response from the bot saying, yes, you're allowed to go on the ride. Enjoy the ride. Now, you see how the names get quite complicated, the explanation gets quite complicated, and within each of these, you will see all kinds of contexts. As question one, yes, yes, follow up, and all that. The context names are pretty difficult to follow. And imagine if I had a chain where I was answering yes 10 times. Imagine it would be question one, yes, 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 and it will go on forever. So I think it is difficult or very difficult to maintain if you create a bot by staying just purely within Dialogflow and not call your webhook. Imagine if tomorrow I wanted to say, hey, you know what? I just realized that my users to say yes, instead of just, there is one more phrase called, my users do say yep to, for saying yes. Now, what I would have to do is I would have to go to each and every one of these intents, yes intents, right? All these 4 or 3 intents that I have for a yes answer and add the new training phrase. Similarly, for my no intent, right? If there was something new, let's say they came back and we realized, okay, they do say this, they say nada for no. Then I'll have to start populating each of my no intents with that new training phrase. So again, shows that the maintenance of such an agent becomes very difficult. The only benefit, which really is not a benefit anymore, because you could have your inline webhooks, you know, uh, there's no dependency on a webhook is the only benefit in this. But if you want to write an inline webhook, even that benefit goes away. Now let's take a look at the second option, which is to create a bot using webhooks. Here is the same that I have created earlier. I'll just reuse it. See how clean it is? I have the 3 intents for 3 of those questions, and for yes and no, I just have 2 intents, one each basically. And from each of these intents, what I'm doing is I'm calling the webhook, and there is some logic within the webhook. In case of these again the same questions where we are responding, with the question, right? I think this is the third one. Is it the third one? This is the third question, and that's it. Do you weigh more than 45 pounds? Likewise, I have something for question one and question two. Now, let me try and see if I can explain this. It might sound a little complicated in the beginning, but really it's pretty straightforward. I'll post a link to the code, and once you take a look at this and the code, you probably should be able to understand it. One way to do this in your code would be, let's say the user comes and says, can I go on this ride? Let's go back and look here. What gets triggered when that happens? That's probably where question one gets triggered. Here's the example. Uh, can I ride, right? Or can I go on the ride? That's one of the expressions. And in response to that, you come back with the question, or the bot comes back with the question, are you older than 8 years? Yes or no. This is where that intent is, question one intent. And here is the bot response, which is actually another question. And You got a parameter called current question, and it has the hard-coded value question one. You could as well use the action name also if you wanted, but I chose to use an additional parameter. So you say question one, and you ask the question basically, are you 8 years old? Now to that, assuming the user says yes. When the user says yes, you call the webhook. What happens in the webhook? In the webhook, you go ahead and check for your current question or your action, and you see that it's question one, so you go ahead and call the next question, which is question two. And when you are calling question two, you are going to pass the values, the previous question and its answer to the next question, so you can keep storing the questions, right? So you pass question one and the value yes, because the user had answered yes, to the next question. Let's take a look at the code where this is done. Here's a webhook I have. I have written it in Python, and within the code, when you go take a look, you will see that at some point, when I'm calling the next question, I am passing on a parameter to it with the name user answer. And the values that I'm passing are, basically the previous question and the answer to the previous question. So in this case, if I go back and look at the diagram again, I am passing on the value question one and yes, which is the answer to the next question. How do I call the next question? To call the next question, all I do is I invoke the event. In this case, if it's question one, I invoke the next event, which is question two. And here is where the event names are defined. So in each question, I have called the, I have given it an event name. I have given it the same name as the intent. You could give it a different name if you wanted, basically, if you wanted. Uh, and that's the follow-up event, basically, that I'm calling, and I'm passing some parameters to it. Now, the idea to pass these parameters is so that within Dialogflow, I keep storing each question and answer so that I'm able to go back to it towards the end and do whatever again I need to do in my webhook. How do I access this value that I am passing back to Dialogflow? Let's take a look at that. If you look at the documentation, you will see that it says when you send a parameter to an event, basically a context is created with a lifespan of 0. Automatically, a context is created with a lifespan of 0 with the same name as the event name. And this is how you would access it within that event or within that intent. You would say parameter name from data. So in this case, my parameter name is user answer, and here is how I'm accessing it. In question 2, current question is question 2, and then here's my first parameter, which is question 2 dot user answer. Again, like exactly like how they have mentioned here, event name dot parameter name from the data. So question 2 dot user answer. And going back to this diagram, that's how I store question 1 dot yes. I pass it on, and then I store that in parameter 1. And then again, for the next question, when the user, if assuming the user says again yes, you again go into the code. You basically go into the webhook and figure out which the next question is. You basically just add one to it and call the next question, and this time you pass on the value question 2 dot yes. Think I must have done it here, hopefully. Let me see. There you go. Parameter 2 is question 3 dot user answer. Uh, Again, this is not really question 3's user answer, but it's question 2's user answer, but I'm using question 3 here because that is how you access the data. Let's see this running once. Yeah, I have my webhook running, and let me clear this guy out. And then I have ngrok running on my machine, so I'm using the webhook from my local machine to fulfill the agent. Let's just see how this works. Can I ride? Oops, the question did not go through. Can I ride? The bot comes back and asks the first question. You say yes. When you say yes, it asks you the next question, but before that, it has already called the webhook, and it's from the webhook that it calls the next event. But now here you see you have the parameter one that I was talking of, or that basically got passed on from the webhook. And then you're being asked, are you 45 inches or more in height? You say yes to that. And this time it stores parameter 2, which was the previous question, question 2, and yes. And if I were to go in here and take a look at the JSON, you will see that it's already storing parameter 1 and now it's storing parameter 2. Now to the next one, when I answer yes, it came back and told you enjoyed the ride. And if I go take a look at the JSON, I mean 1 and 2 are already there. I did not pass on parameter 3, so you don't see it here, but you could do that if you wanted to for whatever reasons. So uh, and within the code, you basically look at the current question and just add one to it. That's just one way to do it. You could use your own rules engine and so on if you wanted to. But again, this is a very simple example to show you the concept of how you could, call follow-up intents or call follow-up events from your webhook, and not having to, then you don't have to necessarily maintain the crazy logic within Dialogflow. You will maintain the logic within your webhook. And hopefully, you have a good understanding of the same now. Of course, if you were to say no to any one of the questions, again, from the from the webhook, you will see the wherein it's calling the, it's just giving the response saying, sorry, you cannot write. I'll post links to the code, and in GitHub, basically, I'll post the GitHub URLs to this webhook, and probably maybe I'll even upload the agent so you can play around with it if you want to. And once more, quick look at the context for each of these. I have put in a context called write question and given it a value of 2. For the first one, of course, there is no input context, but then I have given an output context, and all the following ones have input. The questions in between have the same context as input and output context. For user answer no and user answer yes, it's the same thing. There is an input and output context. Now, why do we need this? If you were to just go in and just directly without, at the very beginning of the conversation, just say yes to the bot's not going to understand. If you say yes or no, it's not going to understand what you mean. But when you're in the middle of the conversation, and then after that, if you answer, for example, yes or no to the question that the bot is asking, then the bot will understand what you mean now, because now it has the context of your conversation. If it did not have a context, and as I said, if you just go say yes, it's not going to understand what you mean. So that's why you have these contexts in here for the yes and no intents. So the bot will pick up the answer only after it asks you a question. It won't pick up the answer just randomly. Hope this was helpful, folks. Again, was just showing you two different ways in which you could create a decision tree in Dialogflow. The first one was using, staying within Dialogflow and not using a webhook. And the second one was by using a webhook. And I hope you agree to the fact that it's much cleaner to do it this way. Of course, there's more work to do in the code, but keeps your Dialogflow interface cleaner, and uh, you kind of put the maintenance more on the webhook side than here. And hopefully, sometime in the future, Dialogflow will have a more or a better UI where you can probably follow a decision tree and maybe reuse the intents and so on. Maybe they'll have that in the future and you won't have to worry about all this. But till then, here are your options that I am aware of. Feel free to let me know if there are other things, other ways in which you have done this. And if this video has helped you, as always, I really appreciate a thumbs up. And one other quick explanation that I want to do here. Fly intent. Can I fly? I'm going to save it. Fly action. Save it again. To that fly intent, I add a follow-up intent called yes. You see now it has fly intent yes. So I go in here and I just remove the context that Dialogflow created on its own. I just delete it here and then save. Now the trick is to remember that you do not move out of this screen yet. Wait for the training to finish. So I'm going to give it a few seconds that I need. Basically have this wheel stop, and somewhere down here it'll say that the training is complete. Yep, the training is complete. The wheel stop moving. So now if I go back and click on intents, you will see that I have fly intent and fly intent yes. Whereas before the fly intent yes was kind of, had this similar arrow and it was looking like a subordinate or like a follow-up intent. Now the two are not related anyway.